The general consensus of comparing the Honda Civic Type R to the Acura Integra Type S is that while they're super similar and both amazing vehicles, the Integra is a slightly more usable day-to-day daily driver. But I'm here to tell you that that is in fact a lie. What we're going to be doing today is taking a deep look into the 2024 Integra, and I'm going to show you that it's actually slightly less usable than that Civic. And we're going to do that by taking a look outside, inside. I'm going to show you some of the features, interior, and technology of this vehicle. We're going to try and throw a bike in the back to see just how usable it is. And then last but not least, we're going to take it for a drive to see what it's like out on the road. Let's start with looks. While these cars are both obviously on the same platform and are more or less the same underneath with a few minor differences, Acura and Honda have done a fantastic job to differentiate them. They really do look like different vehicles. Starting first, of course, with the shape. The Honda is a hatchback and this is more of a liftback or fastback, if you will. The front ends are completely different as well. This Integra is getting that traditional Acura styling that you have on the front, but it looks fantastic. They both have really wide stances to them. They both have these over fenders that, when you look at the side profile of the car, really mean business. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about the Integra Type S is that it has a certain presence to it without being over styled. Of course, it doesn't have the wing like the Civic Type R, and in some ways this car does fly a little more under the radar, but it is one of those cars that if you know, you know. Now this is seen here in platinum white pearl, which is a nice color, but doesn't exactly make this car pop. I would love to see the performance red pearl in person, given that this is the only Integra Type S I've seen in person. And in fact, I took this to a car show recently and I was surprised at the amount of interest that it generated, simply because of that fact. No one has really seen these in person. Peeking under the hood, we have the same engine here. This is the K series from Honda. It's a 2-liter turbocharged engine, same one that's in the Civic Type R, although it is slightly tuned differently compared to that car. This gets 5 more horsepower, 320 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. Rather interestingly enough too, the fuel economy numbers are super similar but slightly different. This gets 21 miles to the gallon city, 28 highway, 24 combined. The Civic Type R, 22 miles to the gallon city. So further proving my point that from a daily driver aspect, you do get slightly better fuel economy in the Civic. As we look at these wheels and tires, it's interesting to me because one of the things that manufacturers can do to give a car a better ride is to give it a bigger sidewall. You can lower the diameter of the wheel, increase the size of the tire, and get a little more compliance out of the tire and suspension. Now, that's not something that Honda or Acura did here. These are the exact same size as they are on the Civic Type R. They're 265/30 19s. While the wheels and tires are the same, the Type S does have different tuning for the adaptive dampers. So we'll be curious to see how much that affects the ride on the road. When we get in the interior, this all feels very similar, and that is because it is in fact super similar to the Civic Type R. There are a few key differences which I will talk about, but let's talk about the commonality briefly here. If you want a super in-depth look, go watch my Civic Type R review. But in terms of infotainment, it's the same. The gauge cluster is the same. The screen has okay resolution. I think Toyota is doing a better job than Honda is, at least with this model. It's a little slow to respond. You do use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, so not too big of a deal. You do get a volume knob. HVAC controls are physical. You do get heated seats in here, which is something different. And that leads me to one of the biggest differences between this and the Civic Type R are these seats. A little less supportive, or maybe I should say a lot less supportive. One of the keys of that Civic Type R are those fantastic seats. Maybe you could argue that you can get in and out of this a little bit easier. So in that way, maybe it's a little more usable, but they offer much less support. They are comfortable and they're actually pretty wide. I mean, I'm a thin guy, admittedly, but I kind of move around a lot in these seats. So a bit of a bummer that you're getting inferior seats in a more expensive car. that is what it is. Now, in terms of the sound system, that is one of the big changes. The ELS Studio 3D sound system is actually really good. So in that way, you're getting a more premium sound system, and this is a little more upmarket compared to the Civic. Now, going back to seating, I think this is really important because not only are the front seats different, but the back seats are different just in terms of room and headroom. I, in the Civic Type R, could sit behind myself and I have just enough legroom and just enough headroom. In fact, my hair, which points up, would graze the headliner, but it was totally acceptable to sit back there. The problem with this lift back design or fastback design is that there is less headroom back there. So me at 6'1", my head is actually physically, no longer just my hair, my head is physically hitting the roof in this car. So from a day-to-day driver perspective, if you are actually going to be using a four-door sedan to put people in, there is in fact more room in the Civic Type R for that type thing. So that is one of the other ways that I think that this is a slightly not as usable car as the Civic Type R. Once again, of course, we are nitpicking here, but keep in mind, there is less headroom in the back there. Now, another thing that will be crucial will be to see if the bike fits in the back of this Integra Type S, because it did in the Civic Type R. So let's go do that now.
If you haven't already seen my Civic Type R review, you should definitely go check that out after this video. But in terms of the bike test, crucially, it was able to fit my road bike without any disassembly. Rather surprisingly, even though these two cars are on the same platform, the rear opening of the Integra, along with its sloped roof, prevent me from fitting the exact same bike in the car without taking the front wheel off. For a vehicle that is intended to be more of a road car and daily driver, that's a bit of a bummer. Now, obviously this is only one data point with my bike, but even the cargo figures are slightly higher for the Civic. Between the back seats providing more room for larger adults and a larger rear hatch opening, simply put, if space is a priority to you, the Civic is the move. And as always, if you enjoy the bike test, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos.
So far, I have given you all my reasons why I think the Type R is the ever so slightly better livable daily driver. But there is one thing that I will admit that is a major advantage of this car over the Civic Type R from a daily driver perspective, and that is this suspension. While mechanically identical hardware-wise, the tuning on this suspension is different, and it makes honestly a world of difference. For its intended purpose, the sports car that is a daily driver that you want to enjoy on a canyon road, this is pretty close to perfection, certainly for the money. The way it controls body motions, you don't have really any perceivable amount of body roll. Excellent stability, but while not being too harsh. And that last part is the key, because my biggest complaint with the Civic Type R was the suspension was too harsh. In daily driving settings, the hard edges were just too much. And for a street-driven car, I just thought it wasn't worth the trade-off of a super flat ride. And this car nails it. And it's so interesting because it is all tuning. So I will concede that this is better, the suspension at least is better than the Civic Type R, specifically for daily driving purposes. But there is a caveat to that, which we are going to cover at the end of the video. So stick around for that. Now, the rest of this car, let's get into the Type S as a whole. I mean, being that it is essentially the same as the Civic Type R, you get all the best parts of the, you get all the rest of the best parts of that car. This engine, while pretty clinical in terms of, it doesn't have a lot of theater to it, doesn't make a super great noise. It's
not a horrific noise. But the way it goes about its business, in terms of Honda's, your traditional VTEC NA engines that rev super high, this doesn't rev super high. It only revs to 7,000 RPM, but it does build power, so you're always chasing after that red line. It doesn't give you, all the power down low and then fall on its face. So that makes it really exciting. Plenty of power. Now, 320 horsepower. It does have 5 more horsepower than the Civic Type R. Can you feel it? Not really. Come on, guys, let's be honest. If you say that you can feel 5 horsepower in your butt, it's all placebo effect. If you put somebody blindfolded back to back and did pulls in these cars, like, you would never reasonably be able to perceive that. Maybe it's a 1/10 quicker to 60. What difference does that make? It doesn't really make any difference. So what I will say about the power level is that it is sort of a perfect power level for this car. It doesn't overwhelm the chassis. And on cold days, it does have the same tires as the Civic Type R. You will blow the tires off of first gear. And the one thing I don't like about that is that this car does have a lot of wheel hop. So I'll show you up here when we're not by a biker. When you launch it in first gear and you give it all the beans, now these tires are warm because I've been hoofing it. You hear that? I hate wheel hop. Like, that is one of my, I hate wheel hop. But, if you're not launching the car, if you're not blitzing the tires in first gear, you don't know it. Second gear, tires warmed up, you never really notice it. So that is one knock against it. But other than that, the way it goes about its business in the corners, it's a front-wheel drive car, but it doesn't behave like a traditional front-wheel drive car. Actually rotates on power there, which is crazy. So they're doing a lot of trickery here. They have an excellent front diff in this thing. And you get all the good things of the Civic Type R. Like I said, this will handle just as well as that car. And more importantly, on a tight road like this, you could be in a lot more expensive car, say a Porsche, for example, and you would be able to keep up with them, no problem. Of course, on a closed course, 10/10 racing driver, yeah, a Porsche is going to be probably a little bit faster on this road. But when we're talking about just doing a canyon drive at 7/8 on a tight, twisty road, like, no one is getting away from you in this car. That's what's so crazy about this thing. Now, we've talked about how pretty much everything in the Civic Type R applies here. Excellent brakes, excellent turn-in, immediate turn-in. Actually, a little bit of feel through the wheel. It is not completely dead like so many cars. I can feel when these tires are falling away from me and I'm starting to understeer off, outside of just the sensation of pushing away. But what would I do for my money? I always, in my videos, I always try and give the suggestion for what I would do for my money. At its base level, this is an excellent car, and I can see why you would absolutely buy one. If you like the looks of this and you want something more subtle than the Civic Type R, yeah, buy this. Absolutely no problem. I have no problem with anyone buying this car. It's excellent. If you absolutely need heated seats, well, the Civic Type R doesn't have heated seats. So, just from a binary perspective, 0 or 1, if there are certain things that you need, you buy this car. But for my money, what I would do, and I don't typically like to bring up kind of aftermarket options, but the only reason I'm bringing this up is because this is a Honda product that you can put in your Civic Type R, or an Acura product, whatever you'd like to consider it. What you can do, and what the forums have found out, is that because the hardware of both of these cars, the Civic Type R and the Type S, is identical, the only difference is the tuning. You can swap the tuning module. There is a damping module in the rear of these cars that there is an Acura part number and there's a Honda part number. And of course the Acura one has the Acura tuning. So what you can do is put that this Acura damping profile into the Civic Type R and have that better ride. Like I said, I don't typically like to give suggestions for cars out of the box, but the fact that it is ultimately a Honda product, it's going to work all the same. It's not going to give you any problems. So I think personally that is the move. Save money, buy the Civic Type R because it's a little cheaper than this. Spend $200-300 on that, I think it's called an ADM module. Put it in your Civic Type R. You have this suspension because the wheelbases are identical. This is a longer vehicle. I think it's 6 inches longer, but the wheelbases are identical. So you're gonna get the same ride. So that is, in my opinion, the move, because you'll get the better ride, you'll get more space, you get a bigger back seat for taller drivers. This is, of course, my opinion. Whether you want the looks of this or you don't want to wing in a Civic Type R, I totally get that. But either way, you cannot go wrong with buying either of these cars. They're both so similar. It just comes down to preference. And while they are clinical in the way that they go about their business, they're very serious. They like to be driven well. They don't like to be driven ham-fistedly. If you're that type of driver, you're really gonna enjoy this or the Civic Type R. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you did. If you certainly made it this far in the video, I appreciate it very much. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button. I am going to be having knee surgery soon, so there will be a little bit of lapse in videos while I go through that process, but hang with me, guys. I will be back and we'll have more videos for you in the future. Thanks for watching. Peace.